Albuquerque city officials say they needed a seasoned negotiator to come on board quickly following a damning report released in April from the DOJ. Scott Greenwood is a civil rights attorney who sued the city of Cincinnati, which also faced a federal investigation. But some city councilors this week balked at his fee of $350 per hour and the process by which he was chosen. A vote to authorize another $220,000, as in $220,000, for his work did pass, but a lot of questioning about the process was in the air. Councilors were more unified in supporting a citizen engagement plan called the Albuquerque Collaborative on Police Community Relations. Joining me to talk about this and other stories of the week, we have line regular Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group. Also here this week is line regular and attorney Sophie Martin. We welcome back another line regular as well, Laura Sanchez-Rive of Sanchez Legal Solutions. And we welcome back again this week Rachel Sams, editor of Albuquerque Business First. Sophie, this seems like a hefty fee for an attorney for those civilians, meaning us who are not attorneys. We don't know the lay of the land on how these things cost. I was having a good conversation with our producer Megan Kamrick about this, about marketplaces and what the market will bear, what one can charge and what one can pay reasonably in these kind of things. It seems to me that Mr. Greenwood's playing a very strong hand very aggressively here, and we need the work, so why not?
I think that's a good point. I think what the city has, if they have done it, they have not sort of shown this to the community. They seem to have chosen this one individual, said, you know, this is the only guy we're really going to look at.
Right.
And so it's hard for us on the outside to evaluate, is he worth the $350 an hour, which is not unheard of in other markets. It's unusual in New Mexico, but his work is highly specialized. And so because of that lack of transparency, it's hard to really say whether the city is likely to get their money's worth. There are other issues with this attorney that have come up as well. Potential ties to Taser, which is, of course, the company that provides the weaponry and cameras that APD has had so much difficulty with.
And as a reminder, our colleague here, Gwyneth Dolan, asked him directly at this table about that, Laura Sanchez-Rive, and he basically said, not anybody's business. You know, this is my contract. Now, he already has a $70,000 contract in hand, another $220,000 approved, and it could go up as far as $500,000 as it's been reported. What we don't know is, what does one do negotiating with the DOJ? What is this special skill that no other attorney at $250 an hour or $150 an hour seems to be able to do? I know you don't know the answer to this because we're not there, we're privy. Any guesses on what makes this so special, negotiating with a federal agency like this?
You know, I would be completely speculating on what, you know, what kind of cards the city is holding as far as understanding his specialization. But my understanding is from, you know, public reports is that he's negotiated one similar agreement with the DOJ in Cincinnati. You know, part of my heartburn in this, and I think a lot of people's concern, probably some of the counselors as well, is that it wasn't put out to bid. This is not something that went through the regular bid process. It was something that, you know, the mayor's office or the mayor himself somehow made a phone call early on when this was happening, got in touch with this guy who seemed to rise to the top as far as the person with the right knowledge. And for a $70,000 contract, I mean, that's the equivalent of a decent, a really well-paying job in the legal community here in New Mexico.
Absolutely.
You know, he got that part, but then to have a no-source bid basically get approved for another $220,000, which could go up to $500,000, just sort of doesn't sit well with people, because there are so many firms in the state that have a wide variety of experience, a lot of partners with backgrounds in criminal justice, other things that they've done, and it's just hard to believe that this was the only guy in the four corners of the state of New Mexico, you know, within the state that would have this kind of experience.
That's the feedback I'm getting as well. It's like that, you know, Tom, there's other cities that have had negotiations with DOJ. There were people involved in theirs, other than Cincinnati. We don't know, again, are we in the power position with this man sitting down? Are we in a positive position versus somebody else? Again, I'm asking for speculation. I realize it's very unfair, but it's a difficulty to get your arms around sometimes when you think about this.
Yeah, whenever you look at contracts and try to understand intent of contracts, you're always trying to, you know, read between the lines to figure out. By means of disclosure, my firm is in the middle of contract negotiations with the city of Albuquerque for public relations services. Now, aside from that, you bet. You know, you always seem to be an expert in somebody else's backyard, and maybe that's the you know, philosophy and the approach that they're using here.
That's right.
But you know, you know, it probably could have been handled a little bit better. But you know, now the proof is going to be, let's see how much this this person can save the city. in potential $1 million here, $1 million there, because this Department of Justice settlement, to implement it, is not going to be cheap. And so that's where you really get the money in these types of situations. Is you pay somebody $350 an hour, you're expecting a certain outcome that you're not going to have to pay as much.
Now let me stop you there, right there, this outcome. Sophie brought this up earlier too, and Rachel Sams, let me turn to you on this one. How do we know we're getting our money's worth? At the end of the day, when the negotiations are settled, we don't know what could have been otherwise. Do you know what I mean? There's like, it's not like it's a bond issue where if something goes hinky, there's like a clawback.
Right.
And this man has to give back a bunch of money because some certain goal has not been reached. We don't have a goal.
Right,
We don't
right.
know what's going to happen, so yeah.
Well, the goal is to help the city fix it, right? Just to move forward and improve things and move on.
Right.
And when I look at this issue, I focus less on the cost because ultimately we're going to want to get someone to help the city in this who is best equipped to do so, has the experience, has the knowledge. That may not be cheap. But I think some of the points that have been raised around transparency are really important. Now is probably not the time, with all of the concerns that have already been raised about APD and the city and the way that information has or has not been shared, to create anything like the appearance of a process that isn't transparent.
That's interesting. And Sophie, to wrap up, again, it's not like a business negotiation. Mr. Greenwood can't come out and say, look, I saved you all $15 million. Well, did you? I mean, how? We don't know what's going to happen.
I see your heartache around this issue, Gene, but I think that this is a context in which there are no guarantees like that.
Right.
We don't get to have ultimate say. It is a negotiation. And so the city will be able to see how he conducts himself, the types of exchanges that happen with DOJ. I think the larger question really at this point is, what is the city negotiating for? And that's something that we really haven't seen enough of. What are their goals working with DOJ through the negotiator? And are they consistent with what the city, the community as a whole, is interested in seeing happen?
Gene,
Please.
One thing I want to just jump in and say, Tom mentioned in his disclosure about his negotiation for a contract. The difference is that Tom's been here for many years. He's got a reputation in the community. He employs people. He pays taxes, I'm assuming. He's a taxpayer here. So when these kinds of contracts get, they're not even put out to bid, we're talking about firms that could have competed for these where they have employees, they pay their taxes, they're community members. This guy's essentially parachuting in, and nothing against Mr. Greenwood, I'm sure he's got a lot of experience, but he's essentially parachuting into New Mexico, and taking his money back out of the state.
That's part of
it's
my
just something
heartburn,
rubs
yeah.
me the wrong way. I can't imagine that there aren't people with this kind of experience.
I don't get a sense there's a team involved here for the $350 an hour. That's part of my heartburn. I'm sure there is. I'm not saying the man's going to sit
Certainly
down
not a
absolutely
local
alone,
team.
but not a local team is what. Laura, there's a new plan at council, the new community engagement plan that came from the administration, but Ray Garduno was the lone dissenting voice on this, which is interesting because he's such a community guy, but he said, in quote, he was concerned the community would be, quote, relegated to these peripheral groups that really have no power whatsoever. How's that quote strike you? Does he have something going on there?
Well, I can understand his concern. I think it's that he doesn't want to see sort of the responsibility delegated to another group, to an outside group that doesn't have, isn't elected or responsible for what happens.
Sure.
And I can understand that sentimentality. I do think, though, that the groups that are involved certainly have a long-term vision of what needs to change. And I think their commitment is earnest, and they're at the table, and they're going to see this through for the long haul. But I think from Councilor Garduno's perspective, it's just sort of a desire to not have this become an element that's pushed off onto someone else's table rather than addressed by the council and the city
That makes sense.
administration.
And Tom, some weeks ago, you had mentioned that the bones of this idea was something that you had felt was needed and necessary for the community to engage.
Yeah, and actually, from that perspective, I applaud it because the community really needs a way to really speak their mind, to provide their input, and which is one reason we saw a number of different protests that were popping up, whether it's in the mayor's office or take over the city council chambers, and so just providing that outlet is strong. I think to Councilman Garduno's point, though, is that he wants to make sure it's just not lip service. He wants to make sure that the city of Albuquerque, and specifically the mayor's office, who's in negotiations with the Department of Justice, actually takes some of what is said. And so while it was a joint announcement from both the city council and the mayor's office, it will remain to be seen just how much of the input from these groups, which I think are a good idea, really make it through to the negotiating table.
Sure. You know, Rachel, there's an interesting bit of the art of craft work here with these kind of community engagement things. There's a call out there from some folks saying they want to see the mayor at every one of them. But there's a danger there too, because folks are still looking for their pound of flesh,
Right.
so to speak. And if the
Right.
mayor's there live, but that's what you have to manage if you're going to do these things. You have to manage those kind of things. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's going to be really challenging managing expectations around this. Doing these, I think, is very important to build the sense of transparency and involvement that we were talking about before, and to maybe lessen some of the mistrust that's developed between the community and APD over the years.
Sure.
It's going to be a tough challenge, too, to balance. People will want their voices to not only be heard, but included. Ultimately, of course, the city is going to have to do what they feel is necessary to move forward with DOJ. And it's going to be a real challenge to make sure that people feel really heard and included during that process.
Sure. So we're down to about 20 seconds here. If this process gets going, and it looks like it will, it's interesting to try to predict the outcome of this. You know, does it make people feel safer, feel heard, as Rachel's is saying? You know, the outcomes.
I think to Rachel's point, helping people to feel heard is just the first step. And so it's going to be how the team working on this project implements those suggestions, reflects them back to the community. All of that is going to make a huge difference. It's not enough to just be heard the first time. The door comes down and you feel like you're not heard if something isn't done.
That's right. There's a danger to this. They have to have a good outcome on this, or they could make things worse, in fact, if it doesn't work. Now, coming up, a citizen watchdog group, questions the slow pace of cleanup at Kirtland Air Force Base.